All right, let's get started. Welcome everyone to the Octane Community Stand-Up for March 4th, 2026. I hope everyone's had a good start to 2026. We've got some exciting things to share today about Octane and its most recent release. So I'm going to follow the standard agenda where I give some release updates. I'm going to do a fairly lengthy demonstration of the various features that were in the last release, talk a bit about the roadmap, some upcoming events, and then open it up for discussion. I believe that following our last meeting, I reconfigured the Teams meeting to allow people to unmute themselves if they have questions. I would appreciate if the questions were kept more towards the end when we have our sort of discussion session. And I'm hoping that that the Teams configuration actually worked. So last month, for February, for the Octane Community Stand-Up, I demonstrated an early preview of what the 10.1 release was going to contain. So some of the content management features that were still under development. And it was great to get some feedback at that time about sort of how those features were working and what kind of scenarios I might need to consider outside of what I had already kind of implemented. And so a lot of that work was done in the last month. And we had a release of Octane 10.1 on February 25th. That release contained 74 pull requests, 149 commits, and there were 6 different contributors that contributed to that release. So a fairly large release in comparison to most of our releases had a lot of code changes and a lot of enhancements that were added. The list of enhancements is pretty long, so overall, the theme for the release was content management. So, of course, Octane can be used as both a content management system and an application framework. So it tends to get, features introduced that cater to both of those use cases. In this particular release, there was a lot more focus on the content management side of things. So features such as site groups, content synchronization, localization, versioning, global replace, copy page, being able to add other types of content to the body of the site and the pages, a new capability for asynchronous processing called site tasks, and then also a developer capability around using the traditional Blazor at page route attributes. So there's a lot that was introduced, and I'm going to walk through a lot of these in demonstration. And also the 10.1 release was updated to the latest .NET SDK 10.03. So with that, let's just go straight into demonstration. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to run Octane locally. I'm going to launch it from Visual Studio just for simplicity purposes. I've already set up a number of sites as part of an installation. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to log into this installation first. And the site that we're on basically has no content in it. It's just using the empty template. And this would be a site that, this would be considered our production site, right? That we're ultimately going to make public and allow people to view. And the fictitious company Inc. If I go into our site management area, we can see that there's a few other sites that have been created as well. There's a staging site, which is where we're going to be doing the bulk of our content management activity, so that it's sort of hidden away until we're ready to publish it. And then I have a localized site as well, /ES, meaning it would be the Spanish version. So I can actually navigate to the staging site, right? I have no content on this site yet either. And if we go to the ES site, similarly, there's no content on any of these sites at the moment. All right, so we're going to start with the staging site. So go to the staging site. And so this is, like I said, where we would do our content management work to kind of build out the content that we want on this site. First of all, we want to make this site look a little bit nicer. So we're going to go into the admin dashboard and we're going to go into the site settings and we're going to pick a theme, a different theme, right? This is using the sort of default Oqtane theme. We're going to use the corporate theme, which is a downloadable theme that's available from the Oqtane marketplace. It's a free theme that anyone can use. And so I'm going to use that theme. And so if I save that, we can see that the site is completely transformed in terms of how it looks. Of course, there's still no content on the site, but I mean, it looks different. I'm going to go into the theme settings within page management, and I'm going to say that I do want to have a hero banner that I'm going to display on this site. And so if I save that, okay, now I have, a banner that's displayed on the site. I'm going to actually go into File Manager as well, and I'm going to upload a banner, which is going to be displayed on this site. So if I browse in here, I've got a banner that I'm going to upload. All right, and it looks like a rocket ship. Great. Okay, so with that, I'll go back to my home page, and I want that banner to kind of appear right here. So if I go into my page management again, and my theme settings, I actually have prepared some content so that I don't have to like type it all in. So I've got a hero section, and I'll just replace the content here, save it. And so we got our rocket ship, and it would also change some of the default content that was part of the skin as well. Um, so I'm going to add a module to the page now, and I'm going to choose a module from the list of that came with the corporate theme. I'm just going to choose the About Us module. You know, just call it, I guess, About Us. We'll add it to the page. So that added some content. I'm going to go into edit mode, and I'm going to go into the settings, and for the container, and I think I'm just going to go with standard width container, and I don't want to display the title. All right, because I saw that the About Us already contains that content. I'm going to go and edit the content now, and I have some content that I'm just going to paste in for this About section. All right, so it just gave me some basic content about this site. I also want to add a footer, I think, so I'll go back in to my theme settings and I'll say I want a footer section. I'll just accept the default footer section that it provides me. And here we go. So now we have like a whole page of content, right? With just some basic content with a banner. I've added a module to the page. I've added some content. I've added a footer. One of the other things I wanted to demonstrate is in the site settings. So if I go into the site settings area, Oqtane's always had this notion of page content where you can specify content that can be injected into the head of the page or the body. So I have some content that I would like to use. So if you're, of course, using Google Analytics on your sites or Google Tag Manager, there's two portions to it, right? There's a script portion, which should go in the head, and then there's a no script portion, which should go in the body. Prior to Oqtane 10.1, you could only put script elements in the body. Now you can put basically anything that you want that is sort of valid HTML, and it'll be injected into the body. So this allows us to, easily add sort of Google Tag Manager functionality to our site. That'll be injected automatically. Okay, and so with that, I think that this is looking pretty good. So looks a lot better than it did with the sort of empty content. And so perhaps now I'm happy with the way that this looks in staging, right? And I'd like to push this to my production site. So if I go into my site settings, I have a section called Site Groups. And I don't have any site groups yet, so I'm going to create a site group. So I'm going to call it, this will be my sync group. And the type is basically what kind of behavior this group's going to have. It's going to synchronize content. So I save that, and now I can choose it from the list. And now I have to specify the different members, meaning which sites are part of this group. Right, by default, the staging site that I'm on is the primary. If I want to add another site, I can say add, and I can choose from the other sites that are available. This is my production site, Company Inc. And I don't want it to be the primary, it'll be the secondary, and I can say save. So let's go back and make sure that that was saved. So I've got a sync group that does synchronization. The primary is the staging site that I'm on, and the secondary is my production site. Okay, great. All right, so now I think I'm ready to actually publish to my production site. So if I go into the control panel, I now have this button, Synchronize Site. This button is only visible because I'm on the primary site of a site group that does synchronization. So if I click Synchronize, that'll submit it. Of course, it's a fairly intensive job, so that's going to execute asynchronously in the background. We can see what's happening if we go to the scheduled jobs area, and we have a synchronization job. And this job runs every minute. And so when a particular site in your installation indicates that it needs to be synchronized, this job is what we'll be constantly sort of checking to see if that needs to start running. So if I go into the log, I can see that it ran, it succeeded, it synchronized the primary site, which was the staging site, with the secondary site, which was the production site. And basically it initialized everything. So it says that it transferred all of the content. So we can verify that by going into the site management area, and we can go to the production site. And we can see that it was empty before, and now it has all of the content that I provided, which includes, the page, the modules that were added to the page, the content of the modules, the file that was uploaded, the footer of this theme. All of this content has been automatically transferred over to my production site. Great. So that's exactly what I was trying to do. So now let's go back to the staging site for a moment, right? So if we browse to the staging site, and I am interested now, like, because basically, a website doesn't stay static forever. Of course, I'm going to want to change things. I wouldn't change them in the production site. I'm going to change them in the staging site. And once I'm happy with them, then I will again, synchronize them with the production site. So what I'm going to do is I kind of like, this page. I think it looks pretty cool. I have a new capability in Octane 10.1 that I want to copy a page, right? So basically, you used to be able to, add a new page and then add the modules to that page. And it was, quite a manual effort to kind of recreate a page. Now we have this copy page option. So I click copy page. I'm going to create a products page for my website. I do want it to be at the same, like appear in the menu at the same level, and I want it to be after the home page, so it defaulted those things appropriately. If I look at the permissions, it's using the same permissions that the previous page used, which is appropriate. So I just say save. And so it created a products page now, which matches the home page, right? Identically. All the settings have been transferred over, all of the modules, all of the content. That's great. And so, what I would do at this point is I could, edit the page, and I can edit the content, and I could, change this to products, right? And I would change the text as well, of course, if I wanted to. And so now I have, a products page on my site. Okay, so and now I think this is great. My staging site has some additional content in it that I like. And now I'm ready to push all of this to my production site. So again, I can go into synchronize site, right, which will indicate that this staging site is ready to have the content synchronized with production. We can go in and we can see what's happening there by going back into the scheduled jobs again. So back into the synchronization job. If we look at the log, it hasn't executed yet. So if we refresh, we may have to refresh a few times because, like I said, this runs only every minute or so. But what we're going to see that's different is like the first time we ran it, it just did an initialization. So it didn't really, it assumed that we wanted to, that everything on the site needed to be replicated. So it doesn't really need to provide you with a log of all of the changes that it made. It just needs to initialize and tell you that it's done. In this case, we only made a change to like one page. We added one page. So it's going to be more specific in terms of what it did. So it tells us that it synchronized the staging site with the production site. It added an about us. So it added, it added this page, the products page. It updated the page settings. It added a module instance to that products page. We never changed the actual title of the module. In the module settings, that's why it says about us. We just changed the content. And then you'll also see that all these pages were updated, but that's because we, inserted a new page into the navigation menu, and that reordered all of the root level pages that were part of the site. And so because of that, all of those had to be synchronized as well. But it gives you a complete list of, all the changes that it made. And so now if we go back to the site management and we go to our production site, we can see that it added a products page. And if we click to the products page, we can see that all of that content was transferred. So that's how, you can iterate on your staging site. And once you're satisfied with the content, you can synchronize it and it'll synchronize it to another site, such as a production site. All right, so now let's kind of expand this even a little bit more. And I mentioned previously that we had in our site management area, we have a site called /es, and so we can browse to that. And it's intended to be the Spanish site, right? It's intended to have the same exact content as my production site, but translated into Spanish. And of course, I may have other sites that are part of my installation as well that are specific to other languages. So first of all, let's go into the site settings and make sure that the language is set correctly, and it's not. I mean, this was intended to be a Spanish site. So let's choose Spanish from the menu. There. And hit save. Okay. So now the language of this site, which is basically specifying that the content of this site is intended to be Spanish. Okay. Now let's go back to the staging site. No, let's stay on the Spanish site for a moment. Okay. So if I go into the site settings again, and we go down to the site groups, we know that there's a sync group. However, what we need to define is that there's a couple of sites that are part of this installation that are related to one another, but they differentiate themselves based on language. So essentially, this is a site localization group. So I'm going to add a new group, and we're going to call it site localization. And we're going to choose the type as localization. And so we save that. And now we have to choose the sites that are part of it. So Spanish is one of the sites that's part of the group. And we want to add, oops, did I click add? There we go. And I want to add the production site, which is the English site, to the group. I think that it would probably be the primary. So if I hit save, all right, so now we have a site localization group, and there's two sites that are part of it, the English production site, which is the primary, and then the Spanish site, which is the secondary. All right. And so by doing so, we know that these sites are related to one another, and you'll see that there all of a sudden is a language selector that's appeared. Um, and that it's because we are on a site that is part of a localization group, and it knows the other sites that are part of that group, so it can render links in terms of how to navigate to the site. So we're on the Spanish site. I can click on this link and it takes me to the English site, okay, which it does, and I can go back to the Spanish site. All right, so those sites are now grouped together, yet they have different languages. All right, so now this Spanish site obviously needs some content because it doesn't have any content. And so I think what I want to do is I'm going to go back to my staging site. So I go to my staging site, and I'm going to go into the site settings. And I go into the site groups, and right now we have two site groups, right? We have a sync group, which synchronize this site with the, well, let's choose that sync group. So it synchronizes the staging site with the production site. I think what I would like to do is I would also like to initially, right now, just add the Spanish site to the synchronization group as well. All right, so now I have my sync group, and it has all three sites in it, right? The staging site is the primary, which is the site I'm on. The production site is a secondary, and then my Spanish site is also a secondary. So by doing so, what I can do now is I can say that I want to publish, right? I want to synchronize this staging site. And what it will do is it shouldn't make any changes to production because I haven't made any changes to this site at all. However, it will populate my Spanish site with English content, right? So that it basically is a mirror image of production. I could have accomplished the same thing by creating a synchronization group between the production English site and the Spanish site, but I'm just choosing it to do it this way for simplicity. So I'm going to say synchronize. All right. So again, behind the scenes, we can go look at the scheduled job if we want to. We'll go into the log area. It looks like it's already executing. And so it said that it was synchronizing, the staging site with the production site. It says no changes were identified, which is correct. Then it followed on and it said, okay, it's going to also synchronize it with the Spanish site. And it says initialization is complete. So that means it transferred all of the content from the staging site to the Spanish site. All right, so let's verify that that is true. So let's go to site management. We'll go to the Spanish site, and there we go. So we have our Spanish site populated with all of the same content that exists in production. At this point, we would go into site manage. Well, sorry, I'm going to go back into the staging. We want to go back into site settings, go down to our site groups, and we go into our sync group. And we want to choose the Spanish site, and we want to remove this from any further synchronization, right? It was sort of like a one-time thing. But once we start localizing the content of the Spanish site, we would not want it to be synchronized anymore, right? Because this will in fact overwrite English content over Spanish content, which is not what we want. So we will remove this member from the site group. All right, so let's go back and make sure that that happened. Right, so now we have, on here, what is that? Yes, no, this is not correct anymore, is it? What happened there? We have the production site. That's strange. I thought that I chose the right one. So let's remove the Spanish site from the site group. All right. Okay, there's something strange going on here with the synchronization group. All right. So now I have two secondary groups. I delete. Well, this is obviously something I'm going to have to check into because it doesn't seem like it's removing the group. Yeah, because I should be able to remove the Spanish site from the group. All right. And then, okay, so let's go back to the Spanish site for a moment. So go into site management. I go into the Spanish site, which, basically has English content on it currently. Um, I can go into page management and go into my theme, and I'm going to change the header so that it actually uses Spanish content. So, all right, so we now have Spanish content in the header. I would also want to update the content for the about. So if I can go into the content for that, I have some content that I prepared previously for that, for the about section. All right, so we have, a site that has, Spanish content in it now. And so the idea here now is that we we still would like to know when content changes in the staging site. And so if I go back into, um, let's go back to the staging site for a moment, and I go into the admin dashboard site settings and in site groups, um, what I would like to create is a change detection group. We choose change detection, save. Um, So whenever the staging site, which is the primary, which is English language, has content changes that are performed on it, I would like the administrators of the Spanish site to be notified. So if I go into add, I can choose the Spanish site and save. And so now I have a change detection group, right? And so that means that when changes are made to this staging site, like content is changed, and I choose synchronize site, it's basically going to review and be able to tell which content has changed on this staging site in the English language, and it will create a detailed sort of summary of all of the changes that were done, and it'll send that to the administrators of the Spanish site, because they need to know which pages changed, which modules changed, um, and then they'll be able to review the English site and make the appropriate changes to the Spanish site. I am not going to synchronize that right now because the synchronization I think is still it's not letting me remove the Spanish site from the previous group that I had created. But with that, you can see how there's, a lot of new functionality. So basically, you can create a staging site, update all kinds of content on the staging site, synchronize it with another site. You can have multiple sites that are part of a content localization group, so that you can, navigate between sites that are affiliated with each other, but where the content is in different languages. And then you can use change detection to notify the translators of the, multilingual sites when changes occur to the primary language site. So a lot of functionality there. And I apologize if it's kind of hard to follow because there is it's just a lot of functionality to kind of demonstrate. So the other thing I wanted to show you, which was a new feature that was added, and we'll do this on the staging site. If we go into the admin dashboard, there's a new feature called Global Replace. So if I go into Global Replace, it allows me to change content in a global way on this particular site. So let's say that I don't want, maybe I finally found a proper name for my company. So I'm no longer called my company, and I'm going to be called like AI Experts Inc. All right. And then I have some other options that I can choose where I can say, whether or not it's a case sensitive kind of a search. Um, I can say whether or not I want the site information, things like the name, stuff that's in the head content, body content, or settings to be updated. Page as well. I can consider the pages that are part of the site. I consider the modules and the module content. So by default, these are all enabled. And so I'll just say replace. It says this operation is permanent. Are you sure you wish to proceed? And I do. And so again, this is like a more intensive operation that needs to happen in the background. So it submits basically a job that needs to be executed. If you're interested in how this works, we can look at the scheduled jobs area. There is a new job that's called a site task job. The site task job is intended for workloads that are more ad hoc, like not on any particular schedule, but usually initiated by a user through the user interface, and things that might be more intensive that need to run in the background. So you can basically submit a site task to this, and the site task job will be running every minute. And when it recognizes there's a workload that needs to run, it'll pick it up and run it. Um, the main benefit of this is it allows module developers to not have to create their own scheduled jobs for these types of tasks that need to run in the background. They can basically create a site task that will then be picked up by this site task job that already exists, and it'll run. So if we go into the log, we can see that on the staging site, it recognized that there was a task called Global Replace that needed to be run, and it replaced all incidents of my company with AI Experts Inc. All right, and actually we can see that if we go back to the home page, we can see that the site name changed. Um, we can, oh, it did not update. Strange. I tested this earlier this morning and it actually worked. So it was supposed so it was supposed to update all these incidents or these instances of Company Inc. Here, 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 and in the name as well. So I'm not sure why that didn't work because it did work this morning. Anyways, it will work. Because that's the idea behind it is it allows you to update um, content across the entire site. Interesting. All right, so that's global replace. I was going to also show in Visual Studio. So if we look in Visual Studio, this isn't obviously in the core framework itself in the server project. There's in the infrastructure folder, there's a new folder called Site Tasks. This is where the global replace task is implemented. So if we look at it, it's implemented in much the same way that or it looks very similar to a scheduled job. It inherits from the site task base, which site task base implements a certain interface called execute task. So, and there's two different variations of execute task. There's an execute task that's synchronous and one that's asynchronous. And then you basically implement, the method that's appropriate to your workload. And so in this case, right, it has to create a bunch of services and then iterate through, it looks at the site information, it looks at the pages in the site, and then it looks at the modules that are on each page, and it evaluates whether or not it needs to do a find and replace operation on the content. And if so, then it updates and carries on. So that's how the global replace works. There is another job as well, or another task that was created. So this import user site task. Traditionally, there was a import users capability, but it was, you know, invoked through the UI. And if you had a lot of users that you were trying to import, the connection between the client and the server would sometimes time out before it was completed. And so that was a bit problematic. So now when you're doing an import user, you upload the file which contains all of your users, you initiate the import task, and then it's picked up by the site task job and executed completely in the background. So it doesn't tie up the front end at all and is always guaranteed then to execute and completely. So that is another, and in this case, it's using the execute task async method instead of the synchronous method because the user manager relies mostly on asynchronous methods. So with that, you have a whole new capability as a module developer to create background tasks that you can easily create from your module and submit, and they'll be picked up automatically by the framework and executed. The other thing with site tasks is there's a full sort of history that's maintained in the database related to each task execution. So you can, basically uh, see what happened, because what tends to happen with these jobs that run every minute, and we'll go back to, oops, that's not where I want to go. We'll go back to our UI. If we go into, the scheduled jobs area, for things that run every minute, um, the logging, the actual execution is like gone very quickly. So you end up losing the history when things are executed every minute. When you're using the site tasks capability, the status of the site task execution is actually stored in a separate table. So you can actually go back and find what happened later. All right, so that is the site tasks and the global replace. And I think the last thing I wanted to show is related to a new feature for software developers. And so I've created a sort of sample module using the default module template. This was created as, of course, an external module. And I've removed all of the things from this module which I don't need. So hold on here. Let me shut down this for a moment. All right, so we'll go back to this module. So this module is super simple, right? It's a module that only has one index.razor component in it. It doesn't have any services, no server backend, no shared project. Like, it's as simple as it gets, basically. And so if we look at the Razor component for a moment, right, we've included the namespace and we've said that it inherits from module base, which is a requirement for Oqtane modules. And then we have these attributes that we're able to provide. These attributes would be very familiar for anyone who started off in developing in Blazor and maybe has made the transition over to Oqtane, or maybe is still developing in Blazor and also using Oqtane. And so the idea in Blazor is that you define your page routes, right, within your components, within your page components. In Oqtane, we do not use the default Blazor router, right? Oqtane has its own router, which has very specific kind of context and knowledge about how, Oqtane operates. That being said, Oqtane, during startup, interrogates all of the different components that are part of your installation, and it can find these at-page attributes. And basically what this does is, like, if I build this module, right, it's going to, compile into a couple of assemblies, and then it's going to deploy those assemblies to my Oqtane instance. And when I fire up Oqtane, it's going to interrogate the assemblies, it's going to find these components, and it's going to assume that, okay, I want to have a client's page automatically created as part of my site. And on that page is going to be an instance of this simple module. And so with that, it's like a declarative way to create modules that are automatically added to your Oqtane site. So the difference here is that normally when you create modules, then you have to go into Oqtane and you have to create a page, and then you have to add an instance of the module to a page, and then configure the module. By adding this one attribute, it basically creates the page automatically and adds an instance of the module for you. It also supports the attribute permissions that standard Blazor supports. So what this essentially means is that in order to view this particular page, which contains this module, a user has to be logged in, which means that they have to be in Oqtane, they have to be logged in and part of the registered users group for that particular site. And so Oqtane, when it sees this attribute during startup, it kind of knows how to configure the page as well, so that it's a private page. All right, then this module doesn't do much. It basically says this is a private client portal. That's the content that it displays. However, it also implements this one property. This property has always been available in Oqtane, but traditionally it has only been used in non-index components. So if you had like an edit component or a settings component or various other components, it allowed you to set the title that would be displayed on the module in the user interface. You are now able to implement this title, and this basically allows you to provide a name, a friendly name for your module. And so this friendly name is what's going to appear in the control panel when you are adding modules to a page. And you would be able to use this instead of creating a module info.cs. Obviously, there's a lot of other properties that are part of module info.cs that you might want to provide, like there's the ability to provide a description, a version, all kinds of things. But for a very simple module, you might not need to specify all that metadata. You might just want to give it a friendly name. And so this is the way that you can do that. All right, so this module is about as simple as it gets. But I'm going to go back to my Oqtane instance now, and I'm going to run the system. And on startup, it's going to, like I said, interrogate. Oh my goodness, this demo is not going well today. Oh, no, hold on here. Trick myself here. So if I go into, I have to be logged in because of this page that it was supposed to create was only visible to registered users. And we can see it created the client's page automatically for me. And that client's page has an instance of the client module, and that's the content that is from the module itself. So if we go into the module settings, we can see that that module is the client portal module, and the permissions were set so that registered users have view access. And that was based on the attribute authorize that was provided. So it's just a kind of a new capability that module developers can use to, kind of simply configure, especially not necessarily if you're building a website, but if you're building a web application using Oqtane, you often want to programmatically create the pages that are part of the navigation. And so using the at page route actually makes that really simple to do now. All right, so I guess with that, that's, I think, the extent of the demo of the new features that I wanted to do. Obviously, there were still a couple of issues there that I need to look into. So I'm going to transfer back to the slides now. And so there were a few issues that were identified in the 10.1.0 release. The one issue in particular that sort of requires a quicker kind of release of a 10.1.1 is that the control panel, if you try to add a new page through the control panel, it doesn't create the appropriate route. And because of that, it makes it more difficult to create a page. You basically have to go through page management in the admin dashboard and create a page that way. That's a big enough problem in the user experience that 10.1.1 is required. And there's a number of other sort of small fixes that were made to 10.10 already, which will be bundled within the 10.11. And so within the next couple days, there should be a 10.11 that's available. 10.2 would be, of course, the next sort of larger release that we would consider for Oqtane. The theme, and this is a theme that's sort of been on the roadmap for a long time, is this notion of scale out, right? The ability to deploy multiple instances of Oqtane that are sort of coordinated with one another and allow you to scale out at a larger, like to a larger scale. The specific features that are identified for scale out, one of them is you need to be able to externalize the assets, like the file and folder assets, into like another location outside of the installation. And so the idea of a folder provider where the folder can configure a location where the files are stored, and those are not in the website itself, right? Not in the infrastructure where the site is running, but somewhere else. There's a very large pull request that was already submitted to provide this functionality. That was done by Ben Zhang. It touches a lot of files, and so I didn't merge it yet because I wanted to get 10.1 sort of out of the way and stabilized first. Caching also needs to be addressed if for scale out purposes. Currently, Oqtane uses the iMemory cache .NET implementation, which is only really good when you're running on a single server, or basically a single process instance. We were going to have to take advantage of a distributed cache in order to achieve scale out. There's a lot of different, like Redis cache, for example, is a good example of a distributed cache, and there's others. There was a pull request from a community member a while ago. This wasn't specific to caching. Well, it was more to address the notion of what's called stampede protection in caching. But there's a discussion in there about the fact that we need to incorporate a distributed caching mechanism. I believe that I was originally thinking that we could use the Microsoft hybrid cache that was introduced in .NET 9. However, it would just be far too invasive because it doesn't support synchronous. It only supports asynchronous activities. So there's a community third-party caching provider called Fusion Cache, which I think is what we'll end up using because it has more capability than the hybrid cache. And it seems like since introducing the hybrid cache, Microsoft has basically done nothing with it. It hasn't improved it in any ways, hasn't enhanced it. And the person that was responsible for developing hybrid cache has since been laid off from Microsoft. So I can't imagine that it will get much attention. So I think Fusion Cache is probably the better option. Scheduled jobs need to be enhanced as well because currently they're designed to run on the server and run on the instance where Oqtane is installed. You will want to be able to specify that some jobs run on some instances and some jobs run on others so that you can scale those jobs out. So there's some improvements that are around that. App settings.json is, obviously a centralized place where a lot of configuration is stored. We've tried to avoid as much as possible putting configuration in app settings.json in Oqtane because of the reason that it doesn't scale out. So we're going to have to review the settings that are in app settings.json and determine, how they can be managed appropriately in a scale out scenario. The ability to run Oqtane on container architecture, such as Docker, is also an interesting scale out capability. There was already a pull request that was submitted last week, I believe, providing support for Docker and containers. And so I'd like to incorporate that as part of this scale out theme. And then recently there was a discussion about visitor tracking and the fact that it also has some scalability limitations to it, and it probably could be better, although I think that the specific use case that was brought up was really related to bots and the fact that it's really hard to filter out bot traffic as AI has come to the forefront, right? There's just so many bots that are scraping sites now. It can become a bit of a problem to manage a website. But anyways, I think that that can be incorporated in the scale out theme as well. Upcoming events, I'm hosting a webinar next week titled Interactive Blazor and .NET Identity. It's basically, highlighting the technique that we've used in Oqtane since the very beginning to allow interactive Blazor to, use .NET Identity for authentication, authorization, and obviously it's a different approach than what Microsoft promotes through the standard Blazor template. If you use the standard Blazor template, then and you scaffold the identity UI, it uses static Blazor for that. And I think the rationale was that, oh, well, you have to use static Blazor components because of the dependency on HTTP context. Well, that's actually not true. We've been able to use .NET Identity with interactive Blazor for the last 8 years. So I just wanted to, isolate that particular kind of functionality so that other Blazor developers can kind of understand how to accomplish that goal. And so that's next Wednesday. We are already kind of planning the next Trailblazer conference. This would be the third conference that we've hosted because we had one last year and the year before. We're still trying to figure out the appropriate date because we don't want it to conflict with Microsoft Build. Usually Microsoft Build is in May. It's possible that Microsoft Build might be in early June. I don't know yet. So I'm holding off on actually setting a date for this so far. But in the coming months, we'll be, of course, getting a date solidified and then lining up the speakers because I think it's as a virtual event, it provides a lot of very interesting content for the community. The next meeting is going to be on April the 1st, which is the first Wednesday in April. Same time, we're going to have Lee Pointer kind of do a fairly decent demonstration of the Oqtane AI playbook that he's been working on, which provides a lot of governance rules, but a lot of code generation and AI functionality that a lot of I think developers are interested in at this point. How they can be more productive in developing applications, and in particular, this focuses on how you can be more productive developing applications for Oqtane. So I'm excited for that. All right, and I think that brings us up to the discussion time. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. I don't know if anyone wants to try to unmute themselves and see if it actually works.
So this is Daniel. Can you hear me?
All right, excellent. It works. Okay, Daniel, go ahead.
Okay. So we've had the experience coming from DNN that there were always some kind of ways to copy pages. And one of the side effects that usually happened is that a user would have a page that would have some kind of data on it. And often you might have something visualizing something, but it would just be more or less a reference to something else. So when they would copy the page, of course, it would still be referencing the same data, right? And they would not realize this though, and they would start making modifications,
Correct.
but
Yeah.
actually modifying both instances kind of.
Yeah.
So my question is,
yeah. Oqtane does not do that. So Oqtane creates a deep copy of the module when it does a copy page. So it creates a brand new module instance and it leverages the iPortable interface to copy the content from to create an exact replica, not a reference copy.
Let's say in many cases that's not necessarily, well, I think I hear what you're saying. So you're basically saying it's asking the module for an export and then importing it again.
It's using iPortable, correct? Yeah.
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 because there are scenarios where you want that behavior and there are scenarios where you don't want that. Just if you were on a blog page, for example, and you wanted another blog page because you planned on filtering, just showing maybe the top three or just by category,
Hmm.
then creating all the duplicates of the blogs would not be expected, right?
Right.
So my main question is just, it would be helpful if the module would know if it's doing an export because it's about to do a copy, or if it's doing an export because it's about to do a site migration, to tell the difference.
Okay, so I think you're talking about a different thing. So the copy page functionality is different than the synchronize site functionality.
Yeah,
Um,
no, what I mean is, like, let's say somebody want to export the site to import it again, okay? In that case,
yeah.
you explicitly want all the data to be included, and you really don't want references, okay?
Okay. Yeah.
But in the other scenario where you're duplicating the blog page because all you're going to do is adjust the filter to only show those by a category, you would
Hmm.
not want all the posts to be duplicated, right?
Okay.
So what I'm saying is it would be helpful if the interface would tell the module which operation it's currently doing.
Okay. So I understand what you mean, and so a good example, I guess, is the synchronization functionality that I demonstrated today. In order to do that, it doesn't it doesn't utilize the iPortable interface for that. It has a completely new interface that a module has to implement called iSynchronizable. And for that reason, it's more, I guess, explicit to the module developer. The module developer knows that if you implement this method, it is specifically for this use case, right? Which is synchronization. Um, I guess for a copy page, um, maybe it is, like you said, unwise to use the same iPortable interface um, for for delivering that kind of functionality. Maybe for copy page, there needs to be a more explicit interface that modules can implement so that they so that it, like you're saying, so the module knows what specific use case it's actually dealing with.
Exactly. So it could be the same interface, but it would be helpful if the module could more actively make decisions based on the scenario.
Okay. Yeah, understood.
Yeah. And the same questions about the synchronization, right? Because there are cases where, okay, you already said there's a different interface because in some cases, similar problem, you might want to duplicate some content, but in other cases, you might actually behave differently. So, for example, if you're using 2Sexy as content management, which has its multi-language, multi-dimensional data model, it would typically still want to reference the same entity because on the other side, it's just going to automatically pick up the right language.
Okay. Yeah, so there is an isynchronizable interface. It is, different than iPortable. Specifically, it's different because it actually has a date that it passes to the interface to say, I want only the content that's changed since a specific date. Um,
Okay, so
right.
similar like to the search indexer kind of.
Similar. Yeah.
Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah.
Okay, those are my questions. Thank you.
Are there any other questions?
There's a few in the chat, Sean, if you want to have a quick
Oh,
scan through that.
okay. All right. I think I got Daniel's questions. Can production be marked as read only so your staging site remains primary? Currently, no. Not sure what that read only. So, to prevent any content changes from happening in production?
Well, yeah, you don't really want to have your production changing, and then changing in your staging won't be the same, will they? So you only want to be able to change in one place and have your production, which is like your live site, basically read only.
Right. So I think, yeah, so I didn't mention that, but so when you're configuring your sites, the users are shared, of course, between the sites, but the roles are not. So um, you like in your staging site, you could have maybe a marketing team, and the marketing team has content management rights to, add pages, edit pages, edit modules, whatever, in the staging site only. They wouldn't have those permissions given to them in the production site. And so as a result, it is read only for them. Because when it does the content synchronization, it's only moving the content. It's not moving the user role assignments of people, right? Because those need to be maintained distinct and separate in each site. So in a sense, you can accomplish that. You don't give people the right to modify content in production, but you do in staging. And then when the site is published, only the content is published, not any of the security rights.
What about modules that allow you to add content when you're logged into the production site?
Modules that allow you to add content.
Yeah. So if it was an application, say like a task list.
Okay. Yeah, but so again, so I guess if you have modules that are in production, like for example, maybe a discussion forum, right? Like if you have a production site and has a discussion forum
Yeah.
on it, then you expect that that's a like user contributed content, right? That is not an appropriate module to even participate in synchronization, right? That like you would only want that instance of the module. Like it would be in both places, but the original content would be submitted through production, right? If you have a discussion forum. So you wouldn't want to be synchronizing content between like a staging environment and production for that type of a module. You wouldn't implement isynchronizable for that module.
Oh yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
Mark, question, assuming the module is put in the default container or the theme. Yeah, so like if you're going to use the at page directive, of course it only gives you a route. And so it makes a bunch of assumptions. If you want more granular, like if you want to be able to specify the theme and the container and various kind of metadata related to like declaratively on where a module should be put in the site and like how it should behave, that's what the original routable module feature that was introduced 3 years ago was for, which the at page directive that was added in 10.1 basically just piggybacks on top of that routable module capability that's already there. So yeah, if you want to declaratively specify, so the way routable modules work, there's a whole blog about this on the octane.org site, but in your module info.cs, you can, there's a whole like object model that you can declare that specifies, where the module should live, what the theme should be, what the permissions are, what like they're like all you have access to all of the settings if you're gonna use that. Yeah. And that's existed for like, I mean, yeah, for a number of the projects that we've delivered for clients, that's been essential, right? Because they want to use a CI/CD type of approach and they want the configuration in the code, like declaratively, right? They don't want to have to manually add pages and modules and stuff. And so that's a very powerful capability that's been there for quite a while now. I think that's all. Is that all the questions? Yeah, that's all the questions that are in the chat. Okay. All right. I think we're at time anyways. So I appreciate you all for coming. Lee, I guess we can coordinate like in the next month about, April 1st, so that you have
Yeah.
appropriate kind of time to kind of show off your, your AI capabilities.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. So thanks, everyone.
Okay. Cheers.
All right. Take care.
Bye.